The new Honda CR-V is one of the easiest crossovers for me to recommend, but it's more than just the automotive equivalent to chicken tenders and fries. So today I'm going to explain why that is, what they could improve, and what's new for 2024. The only real change for 2024 is the addition of a Sport L trim. It offers a nice compromise of features between the Sport and the decked out Sport Touring. That means we have 3 turbo and 3 hybrid trims now. And if you want the electrified model, you better have a taste for aggression, as you'll be stuck with the admittedly tame sport specs. Now, the first of many reasons as to why the CR-V makes a whole lot of sense are the available powertrains. Now, the 1.5-liter turbocharged inline-4 is nothing special. The power output, the torque, are pretty average for the class. In the past, I've found this engine to provide great mid-range passing power.
Honda says they've improved it slightly for the new gen.
They've tweaked the design of the turbo so that the air pressure comes in at a different angle, along with a few other things that should help this have less lag. And this is hooked up to a continuously variable transmission just like it was in the previous gen. Now, the power plant that really sticks out to me is the hybrid. So this uses Honda's inline-4, it is direct injected only. It runs a modified Atkinson cycle, so the engine on its own, not super powerful, but when paired up with the electric assist, we have a little over 200 horsepower and 247 pound-feet of torque. Plus, Honda rethought its transmission. It sounds very similar to Toyota's eCVT. It has a separate motor generator that effectively changes the gear ratio for the engine on the fly. It also allows for a direct drive lockup at low and high speeds to further improve gas mileage and make for a more natural feeling. And that's what this does better than any type of CVT that I've driven in a while, which, make no mistake, this shares nothing mechanically with a CVT like you would find with the turbocharged engine. The second motor is the actual drive motor, and that provides plenty of juice.
This helps the CR-V get to 60 in about 7 seconds. More importantly, passing power is reassuring, though it becomes less impressive as the speed climbs. As does the efficiency, but around town you can get 40 miles per gallon. A big improvement over the turbo.
You can also still get it in an all-wheel drive. It has an actual drive lane connecting the front and rear. It's not like Toyota's where it's a separate motor. Front-wheel drive is about $1,500 less. This hybrid has a couple tricks up its sleeve. One, it does a good job of mimicking shifts, and it doesn't disrupt the acceleration. As the engine switches gears, the electric motor continues full thrust. With the hybrids, you also have a sport mode, which sharpens your throttle response, but on top of that adds in Civic Type R engine noises, which gives the car a sense of humor. Now, racy dynamics have never really been a strong suit to the Honda CR-V, but versatility has, and still is. And that's the next reason that I would pick one up. The cargo area is second to none in this class. It's very tall, it's about 6'4" in length when you have the rear seats folded, and it's well shaped and wide. The only knock, the hybrid models don't have a spare tire, only the turbos get it. You also have ludicrous legroom in the rear, and the back seat is actually comfortable too. Good thigh support, you have standard console vents, and it reclines quite a bit.
Up front, even at 6'3", I am able to find a comfortable driving position,
with plenty of storage cubbies and nooks to fit whatever you have.
While the space is immense,
the handling is what really caught my attention, and that's the next reason why this is a standout from the class. The steering, I think, is well weighted. It actually builds up a little bit as you're going through corners too. It feels predictable and natural, just like what you would get with a Mazda. In fact, the steering weight could maybe be a little heavy for some folks, but it inspires confidence nonetheless. There's not a whole lot of steering feel, but there's like no vagueness on center, and it does actually use a dual pinion steering rack, which typically makes the steering all around better. Underneath, this does ride on the same Honda global architecture that underpinned the previous model and 10th and 11th gen Civic. This is a great platform, and as you'd expect, they've added things like stiffer mounting points, rigidity to the chassis, and retuned the suspension. And a lot of times that's just PR talk, but after driving it, I was really impressed with how much body control this has for a 3,900 pound compact crossover. Whether you're taking corners at a little higher speed or on a rough, twisty road, it feels sure-footed and composed.
From my experience, only the Mazda CX-5 outperforms the CR-V in corners or twisty on-ramps.
But it doesn't just handle well, it rides well. Now, it's not as soft and forgiving as vehicles like the Subaru Forester or even the RAV4 over the worst of roads. You feel some of the small to medium-sized imperfections, but really none of them are harsh, and even hitting some larger potholes, it doesn't jar you. You can tell that they really wanted to ride that middle ground between sperm and sporty. It's also reasonably quiet. It's not going to fool you into thinking it's an Acura, but on the highway, it's pleasant. So I'll also label ride quality as an advantage to the CR-V, but that's mainly because it manages to still be comfortable while also handling remarkably well. The next reason why I think this justifies its higher than average cost for the segment, which I'll talk about more here soon, is the premium factor, or the, ooh. It's got a nice interior. It's really just the same Honda look that we get with the HR-V and the Civic as well. And there's actually less soft touch materials here than in that cheaper HR-V, but the build quality for the price is remarkable. I mean, everything has a sturdy construction. The things that you interact with, like the steering wheel and the climate controls, all feel satisfying. Plus, there's just that understated design to it. Yeah, the infotainment system isn't anything to really write home about, but it's pretty quick and easy to use. I just wish that they had wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto on the lower specs and you didn't have to spend $36,000 to get it. Pushing that aside, at least you have good seats with lumbar control on most models. They are touch firm, but support is good, bolstering is present, and you have nice elbow rests. There is no soft touch for where your knees are, and there are a lot of hard touch plastics in most of the interior. This isn't as well padded as something like a Mazda product, but if you look at a lot of like entry-level luxury vehicles, that's also the case. And really, I think if this had an Acura badge and came out a couple of years ago, I wouldn't have batted much of an eye. I also like that they have matte finish plastics in basically all the areas that you're actually going to touch, so it should look good for a long time and be pretty easy to clean. There's also some details as you crawl up through the trims, like an acoustic windshield and acoustic front glass if you spring for the top sport touring. That kind of thing is nice out on the highway, and if you care, the adaptive cruise and lane centering work really well. Now, the last reason is a bit of a Honda cliche, and honestly, the CR-V hasn't always been a vehicle that I'd recommend to people that highly prioritize reliability, but based off of the previous generation and how much this shares with that car, this gets the nod of approval there. So when it comes to issues from the previous generation, the most notable is the oil dilution problem with the 1.5 liter turbocharged inline-4. Honda says this is because people were driving it in cold climates and not far enough.
Therefore, the engine never got warm enough to burn off gasoline blow-by, which is when fuel gets past the rings and into the crankcase. A little blow-by is normal when an engine is cold, but a fair number of people experienced an excessive amount.
This will cause the oil levels to read high, and also the oil becomes less effective at its job, which can lead to some big engine issues. And while many people did report that in the first model year, complaints started to drop off after that, and owner satisfaction rates for the CR-V have been great. So most people with the previous generation weren't running into problems, and if they did, they were seeing other things like air conditioning issues, really just with the first model years, along with some electrical and wiring issues, like even with the rear view mirror. There was a problem that would necessitate a wiring harness replacement, but it could like debilitate the rest of the vehicle. We also have some people reporting easily cracking windshields, cheap stock batteries, and scant reports of injector failure too. Again, most people were happy with their CR-Vs long term, so overall, if you prioritize reliability, the Honda CR-V gets my recommendation. But there are some real downsides to the CR-V. Well, really just one big one. That's gonna be the price. This is not an affordable car. I mean, I think it does justify the price with its competence, but it's going to alienate a lot of folks, especially if they're trying to keep their budget under $35,000 and they have certain features in mind. I mean, even at 31 grand, you're getting steel wheels with hubcaps, front wheel drive, and a kind of embarrassing 4-speaker audio system.
I'm all for a stripped down entry model, but a 4x4 LX is 4 grand more than a base Subaru Forester with similar features.
The X is still fairly well equipped, but if you get that with all-wheel drive, you're already 35 grand. And that also reminds me, the tech in here does lag behind a little bit. Again, with the 9-inch touchscreen, I'm perfectly satisfied, but like half the trims come with a 7-inch system without wireless CarPlay. And while I do appreciate the nostalgic and cool speedometer, the partial digital dash doesn't really display a whole lot.
I have a few other minor grievances. Stuff like the lack of soft touch materials for where your knees rest. It would also be nice to see things like a 360 view camera, ventilated front seats, or a head-up display on high trims. And while it's a pipe dream, I really miss the quirky features like how you could fold the seats into a bed or use the cargo floor as a picnic table in the early CR-V gens. Additionally, the hybrid's 145 horsepower engine and up to 3,900 pound curb weight means that if you're traveling up mountains on a highway and the battery doesn't have enough juice to assist, it'll probably get lethargic.
This also doesn't prioritize off-roadability. The ground clearance is respectable, but the approach and departure angles and the all-wheel drive system aren't really geared toward that. Like most others in the class, this can just send 50% of torque to the rear axle.
And without a good off-road mode that uses the brakes to redirect torque side to side, the CR-V struggles to power over obstacles. It's for snow driving and getting to the occasional camping spot.
This car was not about off-road. It cares much more about how it handles, and it does that well. It has efficient and capable powertrains, an interior that can actually impress real people with good visibility that also helps it feel like an older Honda and further improves your confidence. And it's also practical enough to accommodate a family or a wide variety of hobbies. If someone told me that they're looking for a 35 grand-ish crossover, the Honda CR-V is the first one that's going to come to mind. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, then please leave a like and help me take over the YouTube algorithm. Subscribe and hit the notification bell for more fun, detailed car content without fluff. Check out my Patreon for an additional podcast, and I'll catch you in the next one.